All right, good morning, everyone. Um, this is going to be my first video lecture for the semester. I'm going to cover Chapter 1 from the textbook. Um, what I'll do with my video lectures is I'll kind of go through some of the most important parts of the of the chapter. Obviously, it's your responsibility to read the entire chapter and to know everything that's going on in the chapter. But what I'd like to do with these video lectures is just to cover, some important points to make sure that you have an understanding of what's being discussed in the chapters. All right, you can see here, Chapter 1. It's the title of Chapter 1 is Nutrition, Everyday Choices. As an introduction, talk a little bit about the history or the purpose of food, and you can see here that most people around the world make food choices based on what they can grow, raise, catch, or kill. So if you really think about it, going back to the earliest times of human civilization, food, obviously wasn't as available as it is now. I mean, I know that's common sense and very blatantly true. But if you think about, how we've developed this idea of being able to select or pick and choose the types of foods, we have to go back all the way to the beginning of time. Uh, back then, I mean, food was, what was growing on the ground? It wasn't even harvesting crops. It was like, there's a berry, there's a grass. It was very experimental at the time. Obviously, as time went on, they started to understand, what particular pieces of grass or leaves or berries or whatever else was growing just naturally was capable of being eaten. And then eventually they started to develop the ability to catch food, to hunt, to kill animals, and eventually start to cook animals in order to consume them. Obviously in the very, very early ages of human civilization, it was very difficult to obtain food and to eat, and lots of times, people in need, they died. Life expectancy at that time, no one truly knows, but I can't imagine it being longer than, say 10, 20 years. It was very harsh times. But as humans started to settle in particular regions, they started to um, learn the idea of harvesting crops in terms of, that what I mentioned before. The understanding of looking at these particular plants and saying, if we can just have more of this, we'd have more food available. So they started farming and developing, small crops, but they were able to stay in one location and eat the food that they grew, because it was at a more abundant amount. And then, obviously people started to, settle in the same location, and then villages were born, and people started to, kind of trade and share their crops, so that, they started to develop a variety of foods. And the only reason I'm telling you this is because I want you to get perspective on, what you have now. Lots of times we take food for granted. Lots of times, we don't really consider the choices we should be making. We just see, oh, there's food available, let's just eat. But we have to remember that wasn't always the case. Now, as villages started to grow, they turned into towns and cities. Then, the variety of food started to increase. The abundance of food started to increase. The need to go out and capture or to grow or to kill food, in order to eat, that started to decrease. And so throughout time, we start developing these towns and cities, and all the way through the current time, food has become very, very available. And now, I would argue that food is just too available now. I say that, I don't say that with the intent of undermining the idea that there's some places in this country and then also in this earth, in this world where food isn't as abundant, and that's an unfortunate situation. But for the most part, we live in our society. Food is so abundant that lots of times we don't even consider, making choices. We just say, "Oh, okay, food is here, let's eat." The idea of food and food availability, I mean, lots of times I think we take for granted. Those are the facts. I mean, facts is food is everywhere. Food is more available than it's ever been before. And you can see here, due to some agriculture and food production, I mean, we now have the ability, instead of selecting food because out of necessity, we're selecting food based on what we like and what we want. Okay, and lots of times, those aren't always the best methods in choosing the foods that we eat. So to give you this is an introductory chapter. So just to discuss some general terms that we'll go into details as we move along through the textbook and through the chapters. We'll have to start off with some very general and basic definitions. I mean, this course is called Basic Nutrition, so we have to understand what the definition of nutrition is, and it's broken down into what a nutrient is. And nutrition is essentially the consumption of nutrients, and really the study of the consumption of nutrients. So a nutrient, in a very basic sense, is a substance in food that provides energy and structure to the body and regulates body processes. Now, when we look at this definition, provides energy, regulates body processes, provides structure to the body. Not all nutrients do the same thing. When we start looking at the nutrients and start breaking down, it says here there are 40 essential nutrients. Essential meaning these are nutrients that we have to consume in our diet. So when we look at each of these nutrients, so we have 6 general classes or categories, which we'll cover briefly in this chapter, but we get into more details, I believe, starting in chapter 3, where it starts, isolating each chapter per nutrient. But when we look at the 6 classes of nutrients, and then even the individual nutrients within each class, each nutrient serves a different function. Some nutrients are the nutrients that provide us with the energy that we need for daily activities. Other nutrients are the nutrients that are needed to provide structure to our body, and then other nutrients are needed for regulation of body processes. So not all nutrients do all functions. We'll start breaking down, and you'll start developing an understanding of the functions that each individual nutrient performs. All right. It's important to understand that there's no such thing as a healthy food or an unhealthy food. So there's no such thing as a magic bullet type of food where you can just eat one food and you get all the nutrients you need. Well, breast milk would be the closest, but unfortunately we don't consume breast milk beyond weaning. Well, unfortunately we don't, but fortunately we don't. I mean, we're kind of too old for that. So we don't go around eating breast milk. So we have to be able to eat a variety of foods in order to capture the nutrients that are needed in our body. Okay. So here are the breakdown of the nutrients. There are 6 classes of nutrients, starting with carbohydrates. Let's see if I can start highlighting these. So you got the carbohydrates. Oh, let me go back. All right, so we have the carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, water, vitamins, and minerals. Those are your 6 classes of nutrients. Now, as we go through the semester, we'll get into details regarding each of these nutrients. Now, the classes of nutrients are broken down into 2 separate categories. We have the macronutrients and the micronutrients. The macronutrients are the nutrients needed in large amounts, and then the micronutrients are the nutrients needed in small amounts. Okay, so when we look at the macronutrients, those are your carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. Those are the proteins that are needed to provide energy and structure to the body. Water is the major makeup of our body. I believe our body is composed of about 60%, 60% water. The micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals, they're important. Don't underestimate their importance. They're needed, but they're not needed in large amounts. I mean, they're only needed in smaller amounts, but they're still needed in order for our body to function at an optimal level. Okay, so as I mentioned, together, each separate category of nutrients provides us with the energy, contributes to the structure of the body, regulates body process. We just talked about that. They're also needed for growth and for maintenance and repair, and to support reproduction. So it's very important to understand that we need to eat all types of vitamins. Nutrients. So it's important to consume a variety of foods, and that's something we'll discuss here in a second. As I mentioned earlier, the term essential nutrients means that we need to consume these nutrients. In other words, we don't make them in our body. Okay, so when you hear the term essential nutrients, we're talking about nutrients that are needed from our diet and the source of food. Okay, we don't make these nutrients, so we can't produce nutrients even though we don't consume them. You can look through these slides, or this slide. As I mentioned, about 60% of our body is composed of water, so we need to consume a lot of water in order to replenish every one of our cells. We have 75 trillion cells in our body, and each cell needs a plentiful supply of water. So it's important to eat water. But we're going to talk about this later on as we go through the semester. Here's another term that I want you guys to start understanding. It's nutrient density. Obviously we have a limitless selection or a limitless supply of food to choose from. It's important for you guys as students, as individuals, and as future health professionals to start understanding the idea of nutrient density. There are several foods that we eat that are not nutrient dense. So those are foods that could actually start, and if we consume several of those foods, they will, they can be harmful to the body. And so it's important to create a diet that's rich in nutrient dense foods, so that our body functions at its optimal level. Okay. All right. So the definition of nutrient density: a measure of the nutrients provided by a food relative to its calorie content. So foods that are high in nutrient density, they have more nutrients per calorie. Okay. And foods that are low in nutrient density have little or no nutrients per calorie. Okay, so for example, if we look at a soda, let's say a Dr. Pepper, we know that there's about 40 to 60 grams of simple sugar in that soda. Well, there's really no other nutrients. So, we look at the amount of nutrients, which is very little, compared to the number of calories it provides, which is what's 40 times 4? But 160 calories or so to 200 calories per 12-ounce can. It's a very low nutrient dense food or beverage. But if you look at something like rice, for example, we can see that there's lots of nutrient. Well, there's a lot more nutrients than there's a lot more nutrients per calorie in let's say a cup of rice, even though it's just a simple food. So we would consider that food to be highly nutrient dense. Okay, but we'll talk more about that later. The bottom point, less processed foods typically provide nutrients, more nutrients per calorie. So, that kind of introduces you to this concept of a processed food. In case you don't know what a processed food is, I mean, is what it is. It's the food that's been processed for consumption. It's been somehow produced in order for you to consume. Now, what's the opposition of, or the opposite of a processed food? Well, that would be a natural food. A natural food is a food that when we eat it, we're eating it in a very as close to the natural form that it existed before it became a food. So if you can think about maybe like a nut, for example, we don't make nuts. We don't produce nuts. Nuts are grown, and whenever we pick them and we clean them up, we eat them as they came in nature. That is a natural food. A lot of meats now, meats they have some processing in meats, but whenever we eat, like let's see at the very top, a chicken breast, aside from some processes that they do to kind of enhance the chicken, I mean, a chicken is a chicken. We eat it almost exactly how it existed before it became a food. You can see another example like the baked potato. Baked potato, a potato is grown. It's a plant, and we pick it, we wash it. Sometimes we deskin it, but we just heat it up and we can eat it. Now we can add to it. The more you add to it, the more processed it becomes. But if you were to just heat up or boil a potato without doing anything to it and consume it, you're eating it in almost its very natural form. Okay, so in a brief nutshell, that's the difference between a processed food and a natural food. And you can see at the very bottom, you can see the apple. The apple, it grows on a tree. We pick it, we can wash it underwater, and then we eat it. We eat it the way it came in nature. That is a natural food. Okay, so the more natural foods we consume, the healthier our diet becomes. Now, there's a difference between eating a natural diet and an organic diet. Okay, organic diet is totally different. It's a totally different concept. Organic just simply means that foods are not influenced by pesticides or any harmful chemicals. And there's more. It gets a little more complex than that, but that's a different concept. Right now, what I'm talking about is the difference between a processed food diet, a diet rich in processed food, and a diet rich in natural foods. Here's another way to differentiate between processed foods and natural foods. If you look on every product has a food label, and it'll discuss, or it'll display all of the nutrients that are included in this product. So if we eat a serving, then we'll know exactly how many grams of carbohydrates, fats, proteins, whatever that we're consuming. What the bottom of that food label is the ingredient list. Okay, so when we look at the ingredient list, and you can see the one on the top, this is I don't even know what it is. It says ingredients: enriched flour, riboflavin, corn syrup, whatever, on and on and on and on and on. Okay, now if you want to know what the difference is between a processed food and natural food, look at the ingredients list. If you see a paragraph of ingredients like you see at the very top of the slide, that is an example, a prime example of a processed food. I mean, what this means is that they had to take all of these ingredients, put them together, process it, and cook it or whatever in order for you to be able to consume it. That is a processed food. Whereas at the bottom, this is an ingredients list for brown rice. You can see it has enriched long grain rice, and then some thiamine, and then some folate, whatever. A natural food is how it comes in nature. This list, it's so short that, they did very little to the natural form in order for us to still consume it. Now, we still have to boil it in order to eat it, but That's it. That's an example of a natural food. If it's consumed as it came in nature or very close to as it came in nature, that is a natural food. Okay, so when we start thinking about putting together a diet, I believe this is one of the strategies that we should start considering. The more processed foods we consume, typically those processed foods are harmful, especially if we put a lot together. But the more natural foods we consume, the healthier our diet becomes. Okay. Now, it's still important to eat a variety of foods. I mean, we can't just say, okay, well, a carrot is natural, therefore I'm just going to eat carrots all the time. No, that's actually a form of anorexia. It's called selective anorexia, and we'll talk about that in a later chapter. But it's still important to eat a variety of foods, but the idea is to put together a variety of natural foods. Okay, so to be able to eat chicken as as closely as it comes in nature, and then some fresh vegetables, and then a rice. I mean, that would be a variety of foods that we're getting all the nutrients that we would need from a meal, and then we start doing that multiple times a day with every meal. And then, for an extended period of time, we start to understand that we've constructed a healthy diet. Okay. There's also this concept of fortified foods. Now, these are foods that have been manipulated in order to increase the nutrient content of foods. Okay, so it says here, in addition to nutrients that occur naturally in foods, we obtain nutrients from fortified foods. Now, fortification, the addition of nutrients to foods. Okay, so what this means, and just to give you an example, milk comes from cows. We know that. What milk companies do, and this, lots of times it's government regulated. What they'll do is they'll add vitamin D to milk to increase the vitamin D content to that milk. Okay. Now, again, there's a difference in concept. Okay, the fortified foods aren't necessarily processed foods. Processed foods, remember, is the mixture of ingredients in order to produce a food product. A fortified food is taking a food and just simply adding a particular nutrient to that food. So vitamin D added to milk, B vitamins added to grains. You can see the various vitamins added to breakfast cereals. These lots of times they're still a natural food. It's just they've been one particular vitamin or nutrient has been added for various reasons. Sometimes you can see here it helped to eliminate nutrient deficiencies in the population. So if they, like the government recognized that there was a nutrient deficiency, and they also realized that there was a consumption of a frequent or a common consumption of a particular product, well, what they did is, and this is something they did back in, I think, the 1940s or 50s, they started mandating that milk companies add vitamin D, which was a deficiency at the time, vitamin D deficiency, which was at the time, to milk, because they realized that people drank milk almost every day. So by drinking milk, they also increased their vitamin D consumption without really changing anything. Okay, so again, there's a difference between a fortified food and a processed food. Okay, so lots of times fortified foods are actually beneficial in terms of helping us consume particular nutrients that are otherwise would lead to a deficiency. Okay. Another concept that we'll discuss throughout the chapter is the idea or the concept of a dietary supplement. And you can see here, these are products sold to supplement the diet. These may include vitamins or minerals, amino acids, fatty acids, enzymes, herbs, or other substances. Now, what supplements do, a supplement is lots of times it's a particular nutrient that's usually found in foods. So if we just simply consume foods, we would be consuming that particular nutrient. But for whatever reason, whether a person's not able to eat particular foods, or there's some type of illness or disorder in the body that doesn't allow the body to process that particular nutrient, that person may have to consume more of that particular nutrient. Now, when we consume supplements, we're consuming products that are isolated for that particular nutrient. Okay, so the difference between eating a food with that particular, so like let's say we're thinking about a protein supplement, a protein supplementation. Okay, so let's say my body needs 10 grams of protein. Let's just say 10 grams of protein. I can either get those 10 grams of protein by eating, let's say, a chicken breast. Okay, so let's say a chicken breast provides 10 grams of protein. I'll be getting 10 grams of protein from that chicken breast. But also with that chicken breast, I'll be getting everything else that it has. Okay, whereas if I only need 10 grams of protein and nothing else, I could actually buy a protein supplement, consume 10 grams of that protein supplement, and I would be consuming the same amount of protein, but I won't be consuming anything else that the chicken breast provides. Okay, so supplements can be good, especially for people who are deficient or are unable to consume certain foods, or are deficient in particular nutrients. They can be handy, but at the same time, the people, or the population needs to know, needs to understand. First of all, supplements aren't regulated by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, and secondly, having too much of a particular nutrient could actually be harmful. Okay, so I know a lot of young athletes, they like to supplement protein. They like to take the protein supplement, which for an athlete could actually be advantageous, because athletes, they're constantly training, they're constantly engaged in physical activity, they're constantly breaking down their muscles. So if they may be eating a well-balanced diet full of variety of foods, but still, the protein content that they're consuming may not be enough for their particular body at their time, with all the physical activity they're engaged in, with all the breakdown, the wear and tear, the repair. So they actually might need more protein. So I've seen a lot of athletes, they'll start taking a protein or drinking a protein shakes just to increase their protein content. Okay, now if the body needs that additional protein, then the protein shakes are advantageous. But if the body reaches the point that like, okay, well, we don't need any more protein, and you still consume more protein, well, that protein is going to get eliminated from the body. We don't store protein. Protein is definitely a part of structure. It definitely helps build muscle mass, yes. But there's only so much that we can build. I mean, just because we eat more protein doesn't mean it stays in our body. When we get to a certain point, it levels off and say, okay, we don't need any more. We still have a lot more in our blood system. We need to get rid of it. So it has to process it. It sends it through the kidneys, just like we do any waste, any waste products. And then the clean blood is sent back into circulation, where the waste is either eliminated through urine, or it'll go through the digestive tract, and it's eliminated as elimination. I mean, for now, I just want to keep it at that. So two things will happen. Either we're consuming too much protein in our protein shakes, that we're actually wasting money, and then secondly, if there's enough protein going through it, being filtered through our kidneys, it could actually start causing some kidney damage. So athletes need to be aware of these issues to ensure that they're not consuming too much protein. I mean, I would hate for a student to waste money. I mean, sure, I'm concerned about their financial situation, but I'm even more concerned about their health. And if they're affecting their kidneys because they're consuming too much protein, that's more alarming to me. Okay, so and that's just an example. I mean, this issue is captured with any supplement. I mean, whether it's magnesium or vitamins or vitamin A or vitamin E or vitamin K or whatever particular nutrient that a person is supplementing. It's important for them to understand how much they really need in addition to what they're already consuming, because if you get to a certain point, it actually can be harmful to your health. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna, you can read on functional foods. Functional foods. I mean, I guess the idea behind functional foods is that it's kind of known that certain foods produce certain benefits or provide certain benefits, so it's important to consume those particular foods. But my philosophy is, if you eat a well-balanced diet full of a variety of foods, in other words, you're not just eating the same foods all the time. Yeah, you're gonna get the benefits. You're gonna get everything you need. The idea is that we need to eat a healthy diet, and it needs to be well balanced. It needs to be full of natural foods, foods that are nutrient dense, and to make sure that we're consuming all the nutrients we need, okay, and the amounts that we need them, okay. So here's a list of an example of functional foods. So an example would be blueberries. They may reduce the risk of heart disease and cancer. I mean, they might. So it's important to eat blueberries every once in a while. Let's say nuts. They may reduce the risk of heart disease. So it's important to eat nuts. But like I said, I mean, if we're eating a wide variety of foods, natural foods, then I believe that already we're putting ourselves at less of a risk for developing any chronic diseases. Okay, so I think one of the final concepts that we'll talk about is, well, I still have a lot more to talk about. The next concept is the concept of calories. Every time we think of food, we hear this term calories, and really it's the amount of energy that the food provides. Okay, calories. We need calories in order to produce energy. But at the same time, just like anything else, if we consume too much, it could actually be detrimental to our health. And I'm sure you guys understand that concept in a basic sense. I mean, we eat too many calories, we don't get rid of them. We store a lot of calories, and we become overweight and obese. So just to understand what a calorie means, a calorie is a unit of the measure of energy in food. Okay. Biologically, a calorie is the amount to raise 1 gram of water 1 degree Celsius or something like that. Okay, don't worry about that. Just the calorie is a measure of the amount of energy in food. Now, when we think of the word calorie, there's two ways that is expressed, and it's kind of confusing. I'm going to try not to confuse you guys too much with this, but just so that you understand it, just so you're aware. When we say the word calorie and it's not a capital C, when it's not capitalized calorie, it's just a unit of energy. But whenever we say the word calorie and it's capital C, it's a capital, it means that it's 1,000 smaller calories. Okay, it's kind of confusing. So whenever you look at the bottom, 1,000 calories is equal to a kilocalorie, which is 1,000. Kilo means 1,000, so it's 1,000 calories. Okay, so if we say kcals or calorie, we're actually meaning the same thing, because when we say kcals or kilocalories, K means kilo, kcals or calorie, we're referring to calorie as a capital C. I don't know why. I mean, I wish they were different words. But just understand, capital C is 1,000 calories. It's a kcal. So whenever we think of food, we're actually counting kcals. Okay? Just bear with me. Just know that whenever we're thinking calories, we're actually thinking of capital C. Okay? So If we say that 1 gram of carbohydrates is 4 calories, we're actually saying 4 capital C calories. So in other words, 4,000 smaller calories. Just bear with me, all right? I'm just kind of introducing you to the confusion. I mean, lots of times we're confused ourselves and we don't understand why they just can't call it a different name. I mean, it seems like every other unit of measurement has a different name. I mean, it's not like there's a mile, lowercase mile, and a mile, uppercase mile, and the uppercase mile means, 1,000 smaller miles. It just doesn't make sense. So I apologize for the confusion, but it wasn't me. But just understand that whenever we say calorie in terms of a measure of how much energy is in a food, we're actually referring to the capital C, or the kilocalorie, kcal. Okay. All right, so the energy yielding nutrients. So I mentioned earlier there's 6 nutrients. There are carbohydrates, proteins, fats, water, vitamins, and minerals. Okay. Water, vitamins, and minerals do not provide us with energy. Carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins do. Okay. So this slide shows you how many calories are in 1 gram of each carbohydrate, lipid, and protein. 1 gram of carbohydrate provides 4 calories. Okay, don't worry about kcal or 1,000 smaller calories. It's 4 calories. Okay, so that's what you need to know. 1 gram of carbohydrates provides 4 calories. 1 gram of fat or lipid provides 9 calories, and 1 gram of proteins provides 4 calories. These are numbers that you need to start memorizing. You need to know this forever. Okay, so if we ate a product, if we're trying to count the number of calories that are in this product, we're only going to, calories only come from carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. They don't come from any vitamins, minerals, or water. Okay, whenever we can drink a gallon of water, we're drinking 0 calories. Okay, now if we drink a gallon of Dr. Pepper, I assure you we're consuming about, I don't know, probably about 1,000 calories. 128. No, that's not even right. And I wouldn't even know how to calculate it. We'd have to do the calculation. I wouldn't even know. But it's a lot of calories. Okay. So whenever we're trying to count the number of calories in a particular food, we have to look at the serving size and how many grams of carbohydrates are in one serving size, how many grams of lipids are in one serving size, how many grams of protein are in one serving size. And we multiply by these numbers. So 1 gram of carbohydrates equal to 4. So if there's 18 grams of carbohydrates, multiply that by 4, we'll get to 72 calories from carbohydrates. And then let's say there's 10 grams of lipids, and it's 90 grams. So 172 plus 90, and then let's say let's just say 10 grams of protein. It's another 40 calories. So you start to add up. So in that one particular meal, we'll consume 320 calories. Okay, let's just say, I don't know what the numbers would be. And if we ate 4 servings, then we multiply that number by 4. Okay, so if I ate 4 servings of this one particular meal, then I'd be consuming over 1,000, maybe 1,200 calories. Okay, that's how we start counting calories. Okay. Later on this semester, we'll start talking about, how we can determine how many calories is needed per individual based on body weight, based on physical activity, based on, various methods. Lots of times we use an average American needs only 2,000 calories in order to survive and perform daily functions. That's average. There may be individuals that need up to 3,000, 4,000 calories just to maintain body weight. Okay, every individual is different. We'll learn how to identify or determine how many calories each individual needs. But coming back to this concept, we can start understanding how many calories are in a particular meal. How many calories each meal provides simply by counting the number of grams of carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. Okay. All right. So when we get into health and disease in relationship to nutrition, we have one general disease, and that's called malnutrition. Malnutrition. So nutrition is, obviously the food that we're eating, but mal means bad. Okay, so there's two ways we can have bad nutrition. We can either be deficient, meaning we're not eating enough, or we're not eating enough of a particular nutrient. Okay, in that case, we'd be called undernourished. Okay, so malnutrition is a broad term. It means bad nutrition. Okay, but there's two ways to get to malnutrition. We can be undernourished, which is the underconsumption of either food in general or particular nutrients. Okay, so we may consume carrots in a plentiful supply all day long, but we'd be undernourished because we're only consuming nutrients provided by carrots, and carrots don't provide all the nutrients we need. So we'd be deficient in every other nutrient. All right, so that's a case of undernourished or undernourishment. Okay, the other side of the scale is over nutrition. Okay, overnourished. Okay, so in this case, we're consuming too much, either too much food or too much of a particular nutrient. Okay, I talked about the example of protein earlier. If we consume too much protein, well, our body eliminates it. We don't store it. We use it to rebuild and repair, but once we were completed with the rebuild and repair, anything that's excess, we eliminate. We get rid of it. Okay? When we consume carbohydrates, we don't get rid of carbohydrates. I mean, we use carbohydrates in order to produce energy and in order to function, but after a certain point, anything that's excess, we don't get rid of. We store it. We store it in body fat. Okay, that's what body fat is. Body fat is stored energy for later use. If we ever get, if we ever go into starvation mode, we get stranded on a deserted island. We go days without eating, whatever. We can tap into our body fat to get the energy that we need to function. Okay, that's what stored energy is. Okay, so if we overconsume carbohydrates or fats, we store them. We store them as body fat, and and if we do that for an extended period of time, we start to grow in size, and that's how we become overweight. That's how we develop obesity. Okay, so we'll talk more about this later. These are some examples of undernutrition. You can see the little girl on the left. She looks like stunted growth. The little boy on the right, he's undernourished, doesn't have the nutrients he needs for just simple body structure. Then you have overnourishment, and based on the stats, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you are aware, about 70% of our country is overweight. 35% of our country is obese. All right. We'll talk later on this semester, and again, this is an introductory chapter, so we're kind of going over what's going to be discussed throughout the semester. We'll get into how diet is studied. We'll look at the interaction with genetics and how it either promotes or either promotes health or creates adverse health conditions. We'll look at this concept of nutritional genomics, which is the study of how genes and diseases, genetic disorders, genetic diseases affect the way we digest and absorb foods. Okay, so there's particular disorders that prevents us from absorbing particular nutrients that a normal person or a person who didn't have this disorder would be able to digest. Okay, so we'll look more at that later on this semester. But in terms of choosing a healthy diet, I mean, this is very basic for now. But I will reiterate, there is no single food that can provide all the nutrients in the body that we need. I mean, breast milk, as I mentioned earlier, is the only food that comes close. But after that, I mean, it's important for us to eat a variety of foods, to eat a well-balanced diet, And here are some other suggestions of high in fruits and vegetables. We'll start talking about, the components of fruit and vegetables, the particular nutrients that fruits and vegetables provide, especially the vitamins and minerals that are needed for body processes. To be moderate. It's important to eat a variety of foods, but it's also important to be moderate in terms of selection. Never consuming too much, because that could actually lead to, even drinking too much water could be detrimental. It's a term called hypoxia, I believe, where it could cause damage to the cells, which becomes life-threatening. So, eating too much or drinking too much of anything, can be detrimental. Okay, so important to eat a variety of foods. Important to eat a balance of food. So, balance of food types in terms of making sure that that you consume all the foods that provide the nutrients you need, and then even within those sources of nutrients, to be able to eat a variety of foods. And then obviously practice moderation in terms of the amount that we consume. And we need to eat a certain amount in order to capture all the nutrients we need, but at the same time, eating too much, like I said, can be detrimental to our health. Okay. All right. Well, that concludes my discussion with Chapter 1. There's obviously a lot more in the readings that you're responsible for, so make sure you read Chapter 1. I will try to get the lecture video lecture on Chapter 2 hopefully on Friday. I'm still a little behind because of everything I had to do to make the adjustments for this course last week. But I'm going to try to get these video lectures to you, on a weekly basis, so that you have something to work with. I know not everyone watches the video lectures, and that's fine. But I know some of you appreciate, lectures just, so that this class becomes more classroom similar as possible. Okay. All right. Well, if you have any questions, let me know. You have some assignments due this week. Your student introductions on Friday and your syllabus assignment on Sunday. All right. So make sure you complete those and get those easy grades. All right. Look forward to seeing your videos. You guys have a good day. I'll talk to you on Friday.